So kind of what you're, again, just so hang on, everybody. This is a little deep,
Yeah.
but what Einstein says that mass is energy, and energy is mass.
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, this is a big deal. So let's. I want to take this a little deeper here,
Yeah.
because, and I loved what you said here, but what we ignore in medicine is energy.
Yeah.
So the more I've been doing this, the more I realize we need to spend a lot more time teaching energy, talking about it, educating. So it's not like some craziness,
Yeah.
quantum, principle that people are like, "Oh, this is too spooky for me."
Yeah.
But kind of walk us through that we ignore in medicine is the energy.
Yeah. And we're skirting around a little bit of the woo-woo zone out here, but it's incredibly powerful. And one example I give in the book is, if we ask most people what causes heart disease, they say cholesterol, right? And they say, that's why I take my statin. Most people who listen to your podcast have, learned otherwise for good, and rightly so. But the idea is there's a certain thing that you're looking at as the cause of heart disease. So one example I give in a book is they actually did certain studies of people, I'm sure most people can relate to this idea of, someone who, like, the couple was married 50 years, the husband passed away at 80 or 85, and the wife's health went downhill right after, or the wife died shortly after, or the wife passed away first, and the husband, and there's just like such
Like a week later or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You see you see it like almost an uncanny amount of time. So what they found is after the death of a spouse, the surviving partner's risk of a heart attack went up 17-fold, like in the 24 hours after, and even 6 months later, it's an elevated risk.
Repeat that again.
So after the death of a partner or spouse, the surviving spouse's risk of a heart attack goes up 17.
17.
So 1,700% over the next few hours today. I mean, literally, what they're showing is you actually can die of a broken heart. But where's the medical test for that? When's the last time you went to a doctor and, you probably know people who went there and were prescribed statin drugs. But the last time they asked, how are your relationships? Any recent deaths in the family? How are your relationships with your parents or your friends or your kids, right? The medical system ignores that. So what these principles are, if we look at the Yellowstone principle, which is holism, we look at the Model A principle, which is the power of the individual, we look at this quantum principle, which is the power of nothing. These are the principles that are the lifeboat. So we gave the example at the beginning of the Titanic. The Titanic's the biggest, the best, like the medical system, but it's sinking. But rather than talk about the Titanic sinking, I want to write a book, and that's what this book is about. It's about the lifeboat. It's what's going to carry us the rest of the way towards health, because that Titanic's not on a journey towards health. It's not going to make it to New York. Spoiler alert. Right? So what is the lifeboat that's going to get us there? And the lifeboat is based on these 5 principles. So that's the quantum principle.
And I really like what you said. Okay, so back to the heart attacks. We're going beyond things.
Yeah.
And I like that where you said no things or nothing.
Yeah.
So one potential cause of a heart attack, and everybody gets this, is stress.
Yeah.
But stress is not a tangible thing.
Exactly.
Let me touch it, feel it.
Yeah.
Where is it?
Yeah.
So again, back to the energy. It's really hard to debate that. I think you would agree. I would agree. Probably 80% of healthcare challenges are stress related.
Yeah.
And that's energy.
Exactly.
It's not mass. It's energy.
That's the point. And there's not to go too far down the quote from Einstein, but at one point he said, the field is the sole governing agent of the particle. So what he says is if you want to control a particle, a piece of mass, you manipulate the energetic field it's in. And that's what stress is.
Yeah.
Right? Stress is the energetic field we all live in. Right? And that field can be positive, uplifting, supportive of healing, or it can be more prone to disease. But the point is that a true holistic healing system would recognize that and recognize the power of nothing or no thing, or the power of energy.
And I think the other analogy you used is when you look at mental health, for example, according to a popular thinking, is depression is caused by a chemical imbalance.
Yeah.
So walk us through that a little bit, because you hear a lot with our today, there's a lot of mental health, anxiety, depression, the list goes on. But one of the major contributors to depression is less. We can't touch it.
Yeah.
We can't. So talk about that. I really liked when you were talking about that.
Yeah. So so since then, they've actually, I think it was mid last year, they actually came out with a huge retraction of those original studies that it was based on. So there's some fraudulent research done to prove what's called the serotonin hypothesis, which is basically a deficiency of serotonin is why they give depressant drugs. So that was actually proven as a medical fraud, just what it's even based on. But the idea was they would give you a drug to manipulate what's called the serotonin receptors in your brain to try to change your mood. Anyway, it worked. Those drugs work 30 to 50% of the time. You know what else works 30 to 50% of the time? Exercise, right?
Motion creates positive emotion, right?
You're exactly right. Mm-hmm. Emotion is energy in motion, right? You're 100% right.
So, back to the energy.
Yeah, and so exercise is as effective as two different antidepressants. And then we can look at, sugar's effect on mood. There's a great book called Sugar Blues, which basically talked about you deplete a lot of B vitamins and minerals that are important for the brain health. But you step back from all of that. And at the beginning, those drugs were only designed to be taken for a year while someone got counseling to deal with the loss that comes up because, depression's a real thing.
It's a real thing.
And, it hits us. And there's been moments, I tell a story in the book when they actually put me on a low-dose antidepressant. It was called Elavil, and I was on that as a preventative for headaches, or that's one of the things they tried through my journey. And that drug now has a black box warning on it that that shouldn't be prescribed to teenagers because there's an increased risk of suicide and violent behavior. And I tell the story of I'd never been as depressed in my life as I was when I was taking that. But I've
so you're taking again, back to leafitis, you're taking something to help your headaches, and
there's another side effect,
another effect of it.
But I heard a definition once of depression as the loss of a game, and I think that really resonates with me because depression can actually come after major wins. Like you think of postpartum depression, that whole pregnancy and going through, and there's some physical things behind it, but like that's a great win of taking a pregnancy and having a baby. But then also you can get depression after it. And there's athletes Michael Phelps have talked about.
Oh, for sure.
He's been Olympic athlete, obviously incredibly successful. He was training a little bit around University of Michigan when I was there. And it's like the depression actually after big wins, which I don't think is talked about on top of. But it's just the end of something without another game there to play
next. And again,
next.
and you can't touch it, feel it, whatever. But again, back to the energy.
Exactly.
I think sometimes we're looking at the body is 100 times more receptive to energetic stimuli than physical signals, such as hormones.
That was mind-blowing, right?
Mind-blowing. 100 times?
Yeah. It's a guy named McClare out of Oxford University. But 100, your body's... say that again for the audience. Yeah.
So the body is 100 times more receptive to energetic stimuli than physical signals such as hormones.
Yeah.
So your body's 100 times more receptive to energy than it is to things.
And the example I like to give for this is, have any of you guys ever eaten a certain food and felt better, more energetic, and eaten something else and felt blah? And most people will say yes. Some people say, no, I feel the same after everything.
No. But I would say no.
Yeah.
They're just masking or they're not in tune to their body.
Exactly. I agree with you 100%. But then you ask them, have you ever been around certain people and felt more energized and uplifted? And have you ever been around other people and feel drained? And everyone will look at me and say, oh, God, yes. Everyone can relate to that idea. And so what's happening in those environments? It's energy. Your energy level is changing. You're feeling the energy of those people around you, and it is incredibly powerful.
One of the things we used to do, as you know, back in the day, I was the director of fitness and personal training at the MAC.
Yeah.
And we would sit down with the trainers, and one of the things we would talk about is their clients.
Yeah.
And that are their clients, a 9 or a 10, and I said, and I would sit down with them privately, and I said, when you look at your calendar, your schedule, and you see certain clients in your book, and you hope they don't show up, it's probably something you need to, for your mental health, you need to move them into another, whether it's another trainer or change your conversation with them, because it's really damaging you. Mm-hmm. It's damaging your energy, everything about you, your persona, and you can tell the whole relationship right there, and that's all energy.
Yeah.
And so trainers are eating healthy, they're doing that stuff, but if they have a lot of really energy suckers, then that can really cause them to be, not healthy in their own world. And so it was interesting. Sometimes they would say that to me, and I would say, well, can you move the dial here?
Yeah.
And then you need to have a honest conversation, because if you can't move the dial, then you need to move the client.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they were like, I never thought of it that way. I go, yeah, if you see them on the calendar and you go, oh no, they're on the calendar today, it's probably not a great thing.
Yeah, I'll tell you, that's a great example. Like, that's a great question. Can you move the dial or move the client?
Because if you can't move the dial, that's where you start.
Yeah.
But then you need to, because again, it's back to this whole energy, because like you said, it pulls you down, and and that's what you want to do ideally when we're talking about mental health. One of the things we try to say is, what can you do to get your energy higher? Well, we know it's movement, it's drinking water, it's getting sleep and whatever, but it's also who you surround yourself with.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And if you're surrounded yourself with people that help lift you up, sometimes it's not always life, but it is what it is. But I think that's also something that I don't think we think enough about, is like who, and I sit this down with my clients. I'm like, talk to me about your circle.
Yeah. Because
if your circle's taking you down, it's probably not going to be a good thing for you mentally and physically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever we want to discuss.
Yeah,
so.
and that's last podcast was on the power of, the one over was on gratitude and
Right.
thankfulness. Right. I mean, that's one thing that I've done.
How powerful is that?
That's one thing I've done. I do a gratitude journal every day, and I've done it for about 11 years. And I think
You
that's
have
like
it in the end of your book.
Yeah, and I think exactly. And I put the acknowledgement. Instead of calling it acknowledgement section of books, I called it gratitude.
I loved it.
I felt like that's one of like the things that's been like really incredibly grounding for me. I spend 5 to 10 minutes every morning doing that, and then doing it at the end of the day. And because we think about eating well, we think about working out, but what are the disciplines that we're doing? What are those? Shared earlier today, like a discipline is like one definition I really like is a set series of actions that leads to an expected end result.
Yeah, I like that set series of actions.
Yeah, so it's a set series of actions that leads to an expected end result. So what are the disciplines we can apply to work on our spiritual or emotional health? And for me, that gratitude process, each morning, touch it each morning, touch it each night, has been great. And the power of that, so you say, okay, so that's fine, but what does that really matter? Well, based on research, if you wear a seatbelt, it adds 1 to 3 years to your life. If you handle high blood pressure, that adds about 1 to 3 years to your life. Optimize your weight, it's about the same. Optimists will outlive pessimists by between 7 and 15 years. So your mood level is 2 to 3 more times powerful than your weight.
Back to the field, back to the energy.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
2 to 3 times more powerful than than the blood pressure and the weight and all that stuff. And, all of that matters. And, we put, part of my life is physical disciplines as well, and disciplines around food. But I think those idea of emotional disciplines, I think there's a question of what are those things, right? And then how can you apply those? But do you give those, because there's a lot of people who go to the gym every day, but they'll be upset while they're there, right?
Well, and I think that's a takeaway right here for the listeners, the viewers, is that, again, we wade in the physical, let's do the exercise, weight, eating, whatever. But one of the things we want to make sure that, your other discipline is, and again, I know myself, I catch myself sometimes and my mood's low, and I'm like, anytime you can kind of move into the gratitude world, everything comes up.
Yeah.
It's really hard to be grumpy when you're, and like you said, just because you go to the gym and you're miserable doesn't mean it's a great thing. Yeah,
something I like to joke about, and Bailey and I have talked about, is like you kind of watch people run, right? And there's just some people are like very light and easy, but it's rare, right? Most people, you almost feel like they're running away from heart disease. They're like angry and
they're miserable.
Yeah, exactly.
Hate it. Can't stand it.
You can feel the mood level.
I'm on the step mill. I hate it.
Yeah, I'm here because my husband made me, or my wife made me, or my doctor told me I have to.
I'm not enjoying the process.
Exactly.